How are you doing, Don? That's your big stick, man. That's how you got you a big
No,
stick.
that's not supposed to do that.
What? Oh no! Break it.
Yeah. Me, this has been about 8 years since I had this one.
Wow. Well, you know, I guess you got your mileage out of that one.
Yeah.
Is it constantly attached to those boots?
Yes.
So.
But now I have to get it remanufactured.
Or welded.
No, not.
Kurt, how you doing tonight, brother? Hey, Hey, Bonnie. I guess Brian's upstairs, so he'll be down there.
He'll be down, I guess.
You're like me, I have no idea.
Hopefully he'll get to come down.
Yeah.
Right.
How y'all doing? Good. Good to see you all.
Have you met Jean and Leslie? And Miss Francis?
Sure.
That's the new one.
Jim. He's a normal name, Jim.
It's too cold or whatever.
Oh, it's good. Oh, it's good.
I got like a little tiny smirk on his face, you know? Oh. They're still down there.
Yes, they'll be down there. They'll be there for too long.
Tell you.
You know,
Well,
clothes.
we have one. Okay, good.
Or did she sign the paper?
She signed the paper.
Yeah.
So it is.
You go around and everybody else looking it down.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
I know.
His job is fine.
You want to start prayer for you? You want to start prayer? Sure.
And
Another minute.
Let's pray we will learn from it this evening. Pray, Father, you'll help us have a good week, the rest of the week. Give us our sins and when we fall short. We ask for forgiveness. We just pray your will be done in all things. We love you, Jesus. Thanks in your son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. Y'all, if y'all had met Leslie and Jean and Miss Francis, y'all make sure you meet them later on. Super nice folks. Glad y'all have been visiting with us. All right, so we're on lesson 9. We started on page 49 on Sunday, and the topic is about bearing one another's burdens. And we kind of talked about, really, we all have a burden of some kind, don't we? We've all got something, whether it's, depression, anxiety, just being overwhelmed and stressed, or maybe marriage difficulties, sickness. Maybe it's the sickness of parents or children. That can top everything. Kids, right? That can just top everything. But we all have some sort of a burden that we have to deal with. And sometimes the burdens can become too much for us to bear on our own. And that's when we really need to have that support system to depend on. And God created the most perfect system for that, and it's the Lord's church. And that system is for us to lift each other up, to be there during difficult times, to help each other. And, we talked about that there were some things. Look, turn over to page 50. We talked about there were some things, and we talked about a difference because we're in Galatians chapter 6, and verse 5 of chapter 6 talks about everyone bearing his own load, and these are the things that we have to do for ourselves. I can't transfer all my burdens and all my responsibilities, my load. Like I can't have somebody obey the gospel for me, or I can't have anyone be baptized for me, and no one's going to answer in the day of judgment for me.
Why not?
Because it's all about me as my relationship with God.
Yeah.
So, and we might be a part of the church, and we might worship correctly and do all the correct things, but if my if my heart is not with it and not in the worship, am I pleasing to God? Just because I'm inside the door of this building doesn't make me right in God's eyes. And so it's about the heart. And so what I can do, though, is I can help encourage my brothers, and y'all can encourage me, so that when we have difficulties and problems, we also know each other a little bit, too. We're going to have a little more trust. I mean, there's some folks that I don't know that great that are members here. They know it. If they call, they probably are not going to show up on my caller ID, so it's going to be a random phone number. But there's a lot of folks that I do have in my phone, and if that phone rang at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to answer it. And if there's a need, I'm probably going to go take care of it. But there's also a lot of folks that I know I can call at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're going to drop whatever they're doing, which probably will be bedtime at 2 o'clock in the morning. But they're going to get up and they're going to come be with me, whether it's just pray with me. I'll never forget, Joy and I have been married less than a year. We're still living in Hattiesburg. And I got a phone call from my best friend growing up. And we grew up in together since we were like 2 years old, going to church together, playing ball together. And he called me, it may have been 2 or 3 in the morning, scared me to death, phone ringing. I mean, of course, I'm a funeral director at that time, so I'm kind of used to getting woke up and having to get dressed and go to work. And so I grabbed the phone, and I was really kind of before caller ID. I had no idea who was calling, and it was my friend. And I recognized him on the phone. He said my name, and he couldn't say anything else. And he just cried, and he cried, and he cried. He couldn't get the words out. So he just needed me just to sit there on the phone with him. Go ahead, Kurt.
I think Paul said it pretty good in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 24. That's what you were saying. Do you know that those who run a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you obtain it. Stay the course.
Like,
Very simple.
I don't know, but you know, sometimes we can get so bogged down, overloaded, that it can take us off the course.
Well, you only said when you come fork in the road, take it. Didn't say which one.
But you know what I mean.
We get off that fast.
So that night, my best friend called me. There were really 2 choices that he had that night. One was to pick up the phone and call me, which we've been best friends since we were 2 years old, or to pick up his pistol, which was sitting beside him on the bed. And he made a choice. He just needed somebody to help him lift his burden. And that was probably one of the longest and the hardest prayers I ever prayed in my life, because I felt like a life was in my hand. But it's amazing what God can do, not only for lifting that burden and but also to deal with the problem. Because what was the problem? It didn't cost their marriage like we thought it was. And in fact, they've been married now for 28 years. And so it's an amazing thing of what God and what the church can do, because the church also received and brought them both together back in Memphis. So anyway, the main thing is we have to be willing to help each other and be there when folks need it. All right, so tonight we're going to begin our lesson we're on page 50 still. We didn't get as far on Sunday as I hope we were going to. But we're talking about some of the burdens that we have to bear are the burdens of sin. And sin can weigh us down, and it can pull us away from the things that are most important. Look, we all sin. But we have to admit that we all sin. We all fall short at times. None of us are immune to that. We all want to try to avoid as much as we can, but we stumble at times. And so we need to be able to recognize that whenever we do, or whenever we see someone in sin, And, you know, sometimes we see our brother or our sister in sin. We have to be willing to try to restore them. But we have to be very careful about how that's done. So one of the things it talks about in the book is that restoration is really for the spiritually minded. And so who can tell me what they believe spiritually minded means?
Person that doesn't think, it's really nebulous, that doesn't think physical all the time, that thinks more along the spiritual level. And I know that's you know, almost taking the term and defining it with a term. But, you know, someone who truly understands that this life is not it. And it's just so hard to get out of your body, to get out of your routine, your life, and to think spiritual. I mean, to think that this is not and that's it's not easy. You know, and I think we all still struggle with it.
So I guess when I think about spiritually minded, I mean, for me, it means that I'm not just out for, you know, making sure that I check my box, you know, just for myself. Hey, I tried to call Alex. I know Alex is caught up in some stuff. Hey, I sent him a text. He didn't answer. Did my part. Hey, y'all, did y'all know that I called Mark this week? Mark's having a tough time. I called him. I want y'all to know that I called him. So y'all can all pat me on the back that I did my thing. Oh, I won't mind. I visited Wesley this week. You know, it's not about, it has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with trying to boost ourselves. Sometimes and y'all seen that before, haven't you? Have y'all known folks like that? Yes. We all have known folks like that. And they want to make sure that they know the good deeds they're doing. And nothing's done in private. Nothing's done in secret. It's all for you to see. Are they thinking spiritually?
No.
They're thinking about the right now. Carnal. Earthly. And so that's a differentiation between thinking spiritually and thinking worldly. You had your hand up.
So, Romans 12, starting with verse 9. Maybe what you're looking for, I don't know, but you want to know how to behave like a Christian. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love and honor, giving preference to one another. Not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer, distributing to the needs of the saints, given to hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind towards one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not overcome evil, but overcome evil with good.
Great passage. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
That suits that really says everything that we're supposed to be doing as a Christian. Because ultimately, what are we focused on? We're focused on heaven. We're focused on God, and focused on serving the Lord. So if we're living by that, then our focus is spiritual. And whenever we do see someone that's caught up in sin, or maybe it's not quite to the point of sin, but maybe it's you're recognizing that maybe they're in a very temptation-filled state. Maybe they're spending too much time with their next-door neighbor who's of the opposite sex, and you're a little nervous about it. I mean, if I saw Alex, if I saw you spending too much time with a neighbor, hey man, Alex, man, what's going on? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but look, isn't it better for us to, in love, say something before something happens? Or what? I mean, if you see somebody ice skating on a pond, and you know that pond's not that thick, or how long are you going to wait till you say something? Are you going to wait until they plunge through? Alex is. Thanks, Alex. No, we're going to give warning, but we're going to do it in the right way, in a spiritual way.
Spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ.
The mind of Christ. I think that's a great passage. Very good one to add. So, if we know that someone is in a difficult situation, a bad situation, a sinful situation, don't we have a responsibility to say something, to go to them? Now, let me ask you, just to make sure I'm going to get, the presentation has to be just right. Gene, you're in sin. You've got to get this fixed right now. How's that going to go over?
Not too well.
Brother, I love you. Can we sit and talk for a few minutes? Are you going to slam that door in my face? I mean, I've probably got a chance to at least get the coffee cup poured.
Maybe there's a better chance of no.
I mean, I may not get a chance to drink that coffee before it gets cold, but at least I'm going to get a chance to sit down. And plus, I've also brought, I believe, the most important message is love. We come across in the right way. We come across in a caring and a loving way. We're more likely to be received than if we come pointing a finger. And I've always been told that whenever you point a finger at somebody, there's 3 other ones pointed back at you. So let's take a look at Luke chapter 6.
Hey, Gary.
Hey.
So one of the beautiful things about being part of a family, right? And we are part of a family. You don't ever want it to get to there, right? Mm-hmm. If it gets to there, you're already losing, right? So there are certain individuals within this family that I'm very, very, very close with, right? That I go eat lunch with, or that I go to their homes, or I talk to them, or we do things, whatever the case may be, right? But they are truly what I would call friends I could call up at any time, anywhere, and I know they would come, right? But we go and we talk, and we feel comfortable enough with one another where if me and Cecily were having a problem, I could go, hey, so and so, man, Cecily's just driving me nuts, man. She's doing this and da da da, and he would give me good, sound spiritual advice. So I never get to the point of what we're worried about right now, or what we're talking about, people that have been withdrawn from it. Hopefully, I never get to that point because I've surrounded myself with people that I trust, love, know, have spent time with, have put an effort into, have done all those things to get there. And my what I hope and pray is that everyone here does that. And you can't, it doesn't have to be everybody, but find somebody in the church that you can have that relationship with, and they're not afraid, and you will not be upset if they tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick on Gene real quick, because I mean, Gene's been visiting with us. I cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, you're
okay. Well, pick on Gene though. So, y'all been visiting for what, 3-4 months, 5 months, something like that. All right. So, you know, Gene doesn't really know me. He doesn't know me. So, are you likely to come to my house and start confessing all the things in your life to me? Because we don't have a relationship yet. Building a relationship, but it takes time. It takes time to build trust with folks that you feel like you can confide in. But we all need to have a relationship like that. Relationships are going to get strained from time to time, are they not? I mean, it could be our best friend. I mean, there's been times my best friend and I didn't talk very much. The one that called me at 3 in the morning, sometimes we don't talk very often. We get a little sideways at times, but then we always come back with an apology, I think something's happened. Maybe you didn't understand what I said, or maybe I said it wrong, and I didn't mean to say that way. And I sure didn't mean you to hear it that way. But it's kind of like brothers and sisters, really, because think about it. If you have siblings, you don't always get along, right? And you're going to say stuff that you would say to your sister or your brother that you would never say to somebody that you went to church with. But then again, you would. Because I've done that. I've said things inappropriate. I've been too blunt at times. I didn't come across with the love. And I've been judgmental. I mean, when I say point the finger, I mean, those three fingers are pointed squarely back at me. I want us to look at Luke chapter 6. And I think Luke chapter 6 is super important. Jesus gives a parable, and he says, starting in verse 39, he told this parable, can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into a pit? A student is not above his teacher, but everyone who is fully trained will be like his teacher. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, yet pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when you yourself fail to see the plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. We always hate to hear that word, right? Hypocrite. You hypocrite. First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. We've got to be very careful whenever that finger gets pointed. The truth is, it's never good to point a finger, is it? I believe the best thing to do whenever someone's in a problem, if I see Brian and I got to go talk to Brian, I'm coming with arms open, not finger pointed. What are y'all's thoughts on that? Besides, you're so right.
I like what Eric said about sometimes you need to say something to someone that they need to hear, not that they want to hear. That's very true. Because no matter how good your intentions are sometimes and how much encouragement you try to offer, if this person doesn't want to be receptive to it, they're not going to be receptive to it. They're a closed door. No matter how long you may have known them, how close you've been to them, it'll happen. And that's why this really caught my attention when Wilson was talking about two different kinds of believers. There's the carnal kind, and then there's the spiritual kind. There's a carnal kind where they get baptized and they show up at church, but it's more habitual, expected, cultural, or more than heart change. And Jesus says, you will know them by their fruit. And then there's the spiritual side where God sees your heart. He knows your pure intentions. And, you know, sometimes speaking to someone encouragement when they need to hear it the most, because you see them falling through that ice, may cost a friendship. May cost all of them. But you do it because you want so badly for this person to see that I don't want you to regret decisions that you were making in the future, because I see where you are headed. When you have that discernment and you feel the Lord tugging on your heart to say something, you have to say something. And that's what happens. But I love what Eric said about sometimes you have to, as much as it's going to hurt you and hurt them, sometimes you just have to say what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. Because 20 people will be behind them and what they want to hear, but you may be that only person that says what they need to hear, which could actually help them and help them see things in their life.
Well, you gotta find that person. So, and luckily I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've had this talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
Me and a couple other guys, and I'm like, hey, tell me what I need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell me. I'm
Yeah,
not that guy.
and
I'm not that guy anyway. You're not gonna
Yeah.
hurt my feelings, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, but tell me what I need to hear.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what I want to hear.
And that's the
You're not
spiritual heart.
helping.
That's not the carnal heart.
Yeah, it's like,
That's-
you're not helping me.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, and there have been times that, we're not thrilled walking away from each other because he tells me what I need to hear.
Might sting a little bit, but then
But that's
you
maturity
sit on
and
it for a
growth.
little while, you're like, oh, I think I see that now.
Yeah. Well, and the funny part is that husband wives. There has been no person on this earth who has ticked me off more than my wife, telling me what I need to hear, and not what I want to hear, right? And now she does it in a loving way, and I would not be where I am to tell her, and I love her to death. But there have been times where Leslie just goes, "Hey, you're screwing up, and here's what you're doing," right? And she knows how to approach me, and I'm very much a blunt person. It's sort of funny. I know we have to be careful how we treat other people, but for future reference, y'all have a problem or you see me doing something stupid, just come tell me, I'll be fine. So it's like, but she's kept me out of tons of trouble. Just because, and how hard is that? I mean, I love her for it, right? But there have been times where we may not be talking very much for a day or two, and then I come back and I go, "You were right. I'm sorry. You're right." So.
And when you tell her that, she does not go, "I told you to."
No, she doesn't. She doesn't.
She does not?
She usually goes, I just love
She
you.
goes back in the bedroom and says it, like whispers it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she does. I would too. But no, it's just,
She has a
Don't
check.
keep that worry.
She's got a checklist on behind the door. She's like, "Oh, check."
hey, but if you're keeping count, she did a bigger door.
I'm just
But I'm just saying, we have to surround ourselves with people. Our goal should be to get to heaven. If it's not, I don't know why you're constant. If that's not your goal, why are you here, right? And so, you shouldn't be here if that's not your goal. Point blank. So if your goal is to get to heaven, then you need to surround yourself with people that will help you get to your goal. And sometimes that's not going to be nice.
Ms. Dragan?
So, to add on to what they were saying, this particular scripture that Jesus was teaching on when he started this section is about the attitude we have toward ourselves. And even with having righteousness and justice, you need to have some integrity about yourself. So he says down in verse 44, where Stephanie was talking about, for every tree can be told by its own fruit. A good man draws what is good from his store of goodness, and a bad man draws what is bad from the store of badness. For from a man's words flow out of what fills his heart. And this was the example that you gave us last Sunday of the publican who was standing up there telling God, I pay my tithes, I pray 3 times a day, I do this, I do that. I'm glad I'm not like this sinner standing there. It's a bad attitude. And we must have a good attitude about ourselves if we have a good attitude about other people.
Well, it's like we're kind of like we're trying to prove to God sometimes how good we are.
Right.
Well, look what I've done, God. But God doesn't care about that. All He cares about is our humbleness and our humility when we come before Him and we serve Him. So, when we think another factor we need to think about is if we have a brother or a sister that it has wandered or is struggling with some sin, needs to be corrected, we have to come with a humble heart. We're not coming to point a finger. We have to be, I think it's important to reiterate that. Not coming to point a finger, but coming to express our concern, our love, and our desire to have them do what's right in the right way. Do you think that you can say the right thing in just the wrong way? Is it still the right thing?
Yes.
But is it right?
No.
So you can say the right thing and be wrong. y'all agree with that? Yes. So it comes down to our attitude. And it comes down to our motive. We've talked about motives, and motives matter, not just in this, but our motives matter in so many things that we do in our spiritual walk. And so we have to be very careful. I want to read this. This is on page 51, in number 2, at the top. The way and demeanor in which we approach someone are as important as any words we say. Some are not restored because of the attitude, our attitude, my attitude, which would be an air of arrogance, superiority, or self-righteousness of the one seeking restoration. I've had a brother before. I mean, there's been times in my life where I've wandered away from the church. And the attitude, and there were a couple folks that came, but their attitude just simply drove me further. Drove me further.
How did they do it? What drove you farther away from it?
Well, there were a couple of them that were, ultimately the one in the end that was actually a blunt remark, but it was the blunt remark that, and then left me sitting there by myself with no one to argue with except for myself. It was my roommate in college, and I was sleeping in on a Sunday, and he was getting ready to go to worship, and I kind of woke up, and he was like, you know, if you die today, your soul will be lost, and you spend eternity in hell with the way you're living. How dare you? And I start throwing things and throwing some words, and he just left, and he went to worship, and then the only one left in the room was me. And then I started rethinking my life and why was I doing this? Why was I living like this? And it was great that he did that. He did say truth, and he didn't say it in a bad, evil way. He spoke the truth, and he simply left. There were others that had approached me with fingers pointed, but they were doing the same thing I was doing. It was drinking, by the way. They were doing the same thing I was doing. But they felt self-righteous, and they came at me. That just drove me further. So, attitude makes such a difference. And y'all, I keep saying I believe it. I believe an attitude of love and care goes so much further.
Amen.
If I show you how much I care and how much I love you, you're going to hopefully accept me, at least to have a conversation. May not change the situation. I have met with many of my brothers, and we all know couples, maybe even that used to be in this room with us 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and they're not here today. They're not married today. Well, they might be married to somebody else. Have y'all had conversations with those folks? That's so hard, y'all. To watch somebody continue to make a choice, knowing that the right choice is to simply stop what you're doing, turn around and go the other way. But they simply can't. I don't understand it. I don't. They can't give it up. Or maybe they just feel driven. Brian, you had your hand up?
Yeah. That is one of the most difficult things because, you know, we're not the one that's usually caught up in the sin. The folks that came to you that were drinking, that's the ones that got the plank in the eye.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, that's obvious.
Yeah.
But the ones that don't, and they're spiritual in that respect, now they may have another plank, something different. But in that specific thing, they're not. And so I think they could come to you, but it's even if you got the relationship, like you guys are saying, it's going to be difficult, and you'll get stuff like, well, no one cares about me. Well, I'm here, you know, and I get that. We get that as elders all the time. Well, I only had 3 people call me. Yeah, well, okay. Do you think we still don't care about you? And that's not true. Jim, it's not true. But you get this deflection, and so you have to be patient, and it gets to be difficult. It gets to be difficult.
You know, sometimes folks are quick to use or to cast a judgment on, you didn't call me. You didn't do this. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. Well, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware. I didn't know you were having a problem. I didn't realize you haven't been to church in 4 months. Shame on me for not knowing that, right? You know, we should know our family. Are there going to be folks we don't know? Yes. If you see a face that you don't know, whose responsibility is to know that face?
Go to yourself, introduce yourself.
It's your responsibility. If you don't know their name, go ask their name.
You're one of the friendliest people in here. You'll hug a bear if you walk into the door.
I will. I've tamed many bears, Brian.
It's hard to avoid.
I'm gonna give each one of y'all a hint. If y'all don't know a face, go to the picture wall in the middle hallway. I mean, and look, there'll be times you'll see me, and it means some folks have been members here for a long time, and I forget their names because maybe they're not always here, or they're here, but they shoot out the door during the invitation zone.
Yes.
Or they come in after the service starts, and they leave during the prayer. During the prayer drives me crazy. If you're listening online, stay to the amen, at least. Then you can make a run for it.
I wrestle a bear.
We'll
We'll talk about that later.
He did wrestle.
He did.
Well, I was just going to comment.
Yeah.
These people that do those kinds of things, like nobody calls me or nobody did this, they just trying to reverse the situation and take the guilt off of themselves. And it's about faith. And you have to know and learn and grow and study, and that's how your faith continues to grow and keep you from being off the beaten track. But it's an individual thing, like you said earlier, about nobody can account to God for me but me. And you know you have the same 24-hour day that I do. And if you don't ever take time to say, well, before I start my day, I'm going to go just read one, especially with the New Testament books. They only like 3 or 4 chapters long. I'm just going to read this one chapter and just meditate on it all day long. But you have to do that. So Gary can't do that, Ryan can't do that, Brian can't do that. And when you don't do that, that's why you end up in some of those situations. Because you haven't used your faith to grow yourself.
We talked about that really at the beginning of the class. That's that personal responsibility stuff. That's my personal burden or load. I have to do that for myself. You can't do it for me. I can't do it for you. But when we do it, we grow. And we grow stronger. And we grow stronger, stronger, and stronger. Somebody had their hand up. I thought it was Kurt, but anyway. Okay. All right. Another burden that we really are there for each other is the burden of sorrow. Man, there's nothing like losing our loved ones. It's terrible. You know, being with Julia the last year, the death of her daddy and the death of her mama, man, it is hard. But the love of our church family showered her. It's amazing how much it showered her. And that's so important because that's a burden that, you know, you're trying to bear it yourself. You don't want to say something sometimes, but it's there. If someone is a widow, you know, I think about that. I mean, I thought about that a lot over my career because I've met with a lot of widows that had no clue what they were going to do that afternoon, what they were going to do tomorrow, next week, next month. Didn't know how to write a check. Didn't know how to pump gas in the car. Because their husband always did it. I've never done that. Or the spouse, the wife dies. I've never folded a shirt. I don't know how to turn the iron on.
Not that big a deal, you really don't need them.
Wrinkles are.
They have those dryers now that are like the wrinkle
Wrinkle guards?
treatment, yeah.
Yeah, just keep drying.
Oh, I buy wrinkle-free shirts to avoid that.
Most people probably just throw clothes in a pile and pull out of it.
One of those steam irons. They're better.
But see that burden, that pain, that being lost, dealing with that alone, it's unbearable. But if you have someone, if you have your Christian brothers and sisters to support you, to lift you up, maybe someone that's already been through it. It's different because the truth is, I always said this. I'd have folks who would say, "What should I say at the funeral?" Don't say anything. Just say, "I love you." Oh, well, I mean, look, I've lost my spouse. I know exactly what they're going through. No, you don't. You really didn't like your husband very much, and their husband was super nice. Y'all know what I'm talking about, don't you?
Yeah.
Grief is different for every single person. It is different for every person, and losing a spouse is different for each person. What about divorce? Going through divorce is the same thing as losing a spouse. Some folks say that
It's worse.
going through divorce is worse. Why is it worse, Peggy?
Betrayal. They are still living.
And you have to see them all the time.
And there is no finality with that.
Yes.
It's different from a spouse actually leaving you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you having a nice second in your heart, but you're still breathing.
And it's not going to heal because the knife's still there, right?
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. One was a choice. One life.
Right.
That's a good point. And sometimes it's a choice that you can't. It's not up to you. That's the hard part about divorce and marriage is it takes two to come together. It takes one to start pulling away.
Right.
And so, sorrow, grief, pain, lifting that burden together and just being there for each other is the epitome of what the Lord's church is about. Yes, ma'am.
And the really, really bad part is the Christians in the church look at you differently. Because you got the D on you.
The D.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate. And Christians shouldn't act like that, should they? Because who knows that might happen to them someday.
Nobody wants it to happen. I'm gonna tell you. Nobody wants it to happen.
I'm going to tell you, not only the wife or the spouse, either spouse is going to suffer. It's going to be rough on the children. I've been there. So it ain't nightmare. I wouldn't want to wish it on anyone.
So I'll give you some truth. So back when I was young, you know, my best friend and I, you know, we were palling around. I'm gonna tell you what, man. Whenever I get married, if my wife ever does this, man, I'm gonna put my boot in her rear end, kick the door, you know. And we talked big because we knew we was not gonna put up with that. Well, I'm gonna tell you, that night that my best friend called me, he didn't care anything about what he said 15 years ago. All he cared about was the woman that he loved, that he had his children with, that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with, and he was willing to do whatever it took and be as patient and as long-suffering and as forgiving as he could be. And I was like, man, kick her to the curb. I mean, I told him that. He said, I can't do it. I've got to give her an opportunity. And she proved me wrong. But in my hurt, I was hurt, and I was angry at her, and I was casting my judgment of what he needed to do. But he knew what he needed to do because he loved her, and he also knew that if he allowed her to leave with no fight, that he was casting her soul into hell. And that's an amazing thing for us to think about, spouses, about the weight we carry of our relationship for each other. So we're going to run out of time. We're not going to get all the way to the end. But, you know, there's other difficult situations that we need to make sure we lift each other up. You know, parents that have children that have turned away from the faith, those parents are struggling. Those kids are still out there. You know, that's like losing the sheep and the shepherd leaves the 99 and goes after the one. Why can we not go after those folks that have left the faith? They're still there. They still know the truth. They just need us to come to them, not with a pointed finger, but to come to them with open arms. And I love you. So let's make sure we think about the attitude and the effort we make with our brothers and sisters. All right, that's enough.
Bearing one another's burden.
Yes, Brian is going to talk about how to bear with one another on Sunday.
Not fair.
Not burying.
You would freak out about that. Got a few of those myself. I know, yeah. Lane's got a good one. Good job.